Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the City of Virginia Committee of the Whole meeting. I will call this meeting to order at 9 a.m. Today is Tuesday, December 3rd, 2019. We have a moderate agenda today, which is fortunate for all of us. We've been pretty busy the last couple of months, but we have some presentations today, so it might take some time. So those of you who are waiting your turn in the audience, please have some patience. And for those of you who are listening at home, welcome. So I will turn the meeting over to our city administrator for the agenda, Britt C. Bennis. Britt?
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is a presentation by Alex Gerke on the update on the West Virginia Airport Capital Improvement Project. The podium.
And would you please step up to the podium, and would you turn the light on to green? And please state your name for the record, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting.
Hi, well, hello, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. My name is Alex Gerke. I work for KLJ Engineering, and I'm the airport's engineer.
Thank you.
So an update on the projects going on at the West Virginia Airport. This summer will be the final project in what will essentially be the rehabilitation of the entire airfield that began in about 2008. In 2008, we embarked on a master plan study. This was just to update the overall plan for the airport and where the airport wanted to go into the future. Once that was finished, it identified some certain needs that had to be taken care of. Specifically, a lot of the pavements were from the 1970s. Pavements don't last that long. They were all distressed, heaving, and whatnot. So we put a plan together to prioritize and repair all this infrastructure. Starting in 2012, we began the runway reconstruction project. That was completed in 2014. That was completed by Ullin Brothers, and it also included the accompanying taxiways along with it. In 2016, we began working on the actual hangar taxi lanes, the pavements right in front of all the hangars that allow access for all the local pilots and itinerant pilots. That was completed by KGM at the end of 2017. Shortly after that, actually last year, we began working on the apron. The apron had to be broken into two phases due to its size and financial burden across everyone, the FAA, state of Minnesota, and the local entities. That was completed by Ullin Brothers just this last summer. KGM also completed a bypass taxiway on the airfield, a small, about 400 feet long taxiway that allows aircraft to turn around. This summer will be the final project, the last half of the apron. This is by far the largest piece of the apron. It will be completed by Mesabi Bituminous, expected to start in May, and its completion in November. Once this is complete, the infrastructure needs of the airport are going to be met, and they can begin focusing on more futuristic wants and needs, more development as far as hangars. If entities want to come in and start businesses and whatnot, they will have the infrastructure to meet that. For example, North Memorial is there now. That's helped a lot. That's kind of the update, I guess. Are there any questions?
I do have a couple questions. Thank you. Is it Mr. Gerke?
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Gerke. I just have a couple questions. It may envelop into something that maybe Jackie or Britt can answer. My experience has been sitting a very short stint on the airport authority when I first became on the city council. So you're looking at this new fuel system of 2018, and it's something that's it's an old antiquated system. It needs to be replaced. You want to make sure you're mitigating any soil issues. I worked at the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport for 15 years. I realized the need for that. So you have a fixed-base operator there, Taconite Aviation. And Taconite Aviation has been there for a long time. I think is it Gary Ullman that operates the fixed-base operator is. So my question is that, and I have a question in another sense about the fixed-base operator. Are those contracts renewed on an annual basis? Do you go out for bids for the new contract? Or is he's just an employee that is continuing to be the airport authority moving forward for Taconite Aviation? That's a separate entity. But the question for you is they have equipment, fuel equipment. They have to fuel the aircraft. They have to generate the fuel from the system to get into the aircraft fuel into the aircraft. Will they have to make any accommodations to their equipment in order to access the new fuel system? Are there new fasteners or couplings or anything that they would have to purchase in order to accommodate the new fuel system moving forward? Is that something, or what they have now, will they be compatible as they access the fuel for the aircraft?
So the entire fuel system is brand new as of last summer. It was relocated. The existing system was underground tanks. They were old, past their useful life. We installed a new above-ground system with standard aviation cabinets and dispensers. There aren't any special needs.
Okay. Well, that answered my question, thank you. I thought that it was completed last year, but when it shows that, I was wondering if it's just carried forward or if it's just phase 1 or phase 2, because it showed phase 1 construction and then the new fuel system construction. And so I didn't know if it was the entire fuel system was completed or was just part of it, and you've answered my question, thank you. And then one other question, as you move forward with these construction phases with Mesaba Bituminous, now these are costs that have to be incurred by the airport, and the costs are borne by the City of Virginia and the City of Evelyn in concert with one another in an agreement. I think it's by ordinance now. Okay, so the question for me is that when these construction projects begin, if you could just explain to me, and just to give me a little update with respect to your involvement and the rest of the council about the costs associated with this, and what is the cost that the airport's incurring in these projects that you're working with, and what was the total cost of that, and what is the cost that's incurred by the City of Virginia and the City of Evelyn? And then the match that we have to do, or did we have to do a match for the FAA component? So it's an FAA 90%, 10% for us. Is that how that works?
So generally speaking,
Thank you.
any eligible projects are covered 90% by the FAA, 5% by the state of Minnesota, and 5% by the local share.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. That answers my questions. Anybody else have a question or a comment? Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Are we going to get to see some financial information regarding, I guess I'm curious about North Memorial and how that's helping. Are we going to get some of that financial passed to us?
So I can't speak for North Memorial. As they're a private company, I can't tell you whether or not they're going to open their books.
Since we have Jackie from Evelyn here and the fiscal agent, maybe we should ask Jackie if she could step up.
That's where I was getting at. Just
Thank you,
and
Julianne.
I understand North Memorial is a private entity. I just mean how that's impacted the airport itself.
Yeah, there's a contract, and what do they pay? Jackie, good morning.
Hi, good morning to
Welcome.
everybody. Thanks for letting me come over here. So North Memorial, you are correct. Their air care is a part of the whole North Memorial system. They own a large hangar that they actually lease from their contractor because they're unable to own on their own. And so I don't have their flight data, but we can certainly prepare that in a report for you for next year. I am still learning the financials, and it really helps that Chris from your staff here is the secretary bookkeeper, and it's a really wonderful pact we have going between these two cities. So we should be able to prepare something in January and February that takes a look back at what we've completed. And by then I'll know if we're going to get another grant from the IRRB. A grant has been applied for this apron phase 2. And what that money would do would of course offset our City of Evelyn, your City of Virginia's contribution to the next project, and we'll have a better handle. They did just complete their 2018 audit. And I'm guessing that Chris probably brought a copy over to Britt. And from what I see, I went through all their paperwork, things are okay. We could all do a little better. The key here is understanding the financials, and we're doing okay with that. There's a big learning curve, but it's going okay. We have a tight rein on all the funds, and I really feel good about that part, and Chris has been a huge addition to making things work, so thank you.
Okay, and thank you. And then I have one more question on a follow-up with you on the proposal here. Under other, it says the cities and authority will be considering options with the turf area and the seaplane base. So the seaplane base was taken over by the airport authority, who actually was deeded over. And of course, there's some challenges there at the seaplane base. So with respect to maybe if you have done some soil borings, or if you had some preliminary preparation in anticipation of doing some improvements in the seaplane base. Have you found any any corrections that need to be made, or is there a plan moving forward, or is it too preliminary at this time?
So right now, we haven't done any sort of preliminary investigation at the seaplane
Okay.
base.
Okay.
Other than a quick glance at these are likely things, but
Mm-hmm.
until we get approval to go out there, take sail borings, and actually do some investigation, it's hard to say what future costs were going to be for any needed improvements or anything.
Well, and it has been a challenge for the cities to come up with a 5% match in some respects, and then the annual allocation that we give. But it's a well worthwhile investment that we make together as communities, because this is an important cog for economic traffic back and forth, particularly from UPS, who uses that base, the airport every day to fly their packages in and out, and there's private business and other package companies, and there's an economic driver to these facilities. So, if you're looking at a project cost of $1 million, say, for example, that probably raises the concerns of the general public and other people. But when you look at a 95-5 split, that really is a great opportunity for us to improve the airport moving forward. And I know that the FAA has been looking at Category 5 airports and even some Category 4 airports, and looking at whether or not they want to continue to fund those airports moving forward. And they have taken some steps in the last couple of years in order to eliminate maybe some of their involvement in airports. And one is in the local north part of the state of Minnesota. I don't know if it's Two Harbors or somewhere that there's a concern about that, but we are a pretty substantiated entity that really has proven the fact that this airport is needed for commerce, and that the FAA identifies it, recognizes this need for commerce, and so they continue to invest, and we need to take advantage of that opportunity to do so. So thank you for your presentation. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Jackie, for coming. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add moving forward? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gerke.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the purchase agreement for the Joint Powers Board of ISD 706. This is the subsequent to the development agreement.
Has Tom had an opportunity to review this? Okay, so, and he's not here to express any concerns with respect to that, and he gives his blessing for this as a document that's reasonable and prudent?
He has a meeting with Essentia today, so he couldn't
Yes.
be here this morning, but
Very good, thank you. Anybody have anything, Counselor Bearable?
No, I was just going to make a motion that we move this and for approval to the council meeting next week on the 10th.
Thank you. Moved by Counselor Bearable. Is there support?
I'll support.
Support by Counselor Paulson. Any further discussion? I just be reading through this. There's just one concern that I had, and it's been addressed, and it's under G, as is condition, that the school is purchasing this property as is, and no other financial commitment is going to be made by the city of Virginia, that the $50,000 purchase encompasses all responsibilities back to the Independent School District number 706. I think that was a concern that some of us had, and that's in here, so that's a good thing. So it's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
thank you. The next item on the agenda is the RFP for the Benai Abraham Museum. And what I'm bringing to you is a question. I was not at the last meeting, and what I read from the minutes, it was my understanding the city was not going to take ownership for the building, but we were going to help find somebody to manage it. I sent 2 different RFPs to the attorney, Alan Milovitz. He did not like either one of them, so he sent back this one that's in your packet, which states the city will take ownership and find somebody to manage the building. And him and I have gone back and forth in numerous emails and arguments, and I keep saying my interpretation of the minutes is that the city does not want to own it. And he says his interpretation of the minutes is the city will own the building. So I want clarification from the council, if I can, one more time. Is this the RFP we want to put out there where we own the building and we find somebody to manage the building?
Okay, thank you. I guess I can, let's start, Counselor Beyondich.
Being at the meeting, I think it was made clear that we would help find an entity to do that, but we as a city would not. Thank you.
Thank you. For me, I think this is an opportunity for us. I mean, this building is mint condition. I mean, we went through all the arguments at the meeting. We talked about it at the city council meetings. We don't rehash it, but it's a missed opportunity, I think, for us. The cost associated with running this over an annual basis is not that much money. Our Park and Rec Director, Brian Schibber, put together some numbers as to what the cost associated for an annual basis. And so I just want to reiterate that during my travels, I met an old classmate of mine. His name is Lee Rubenstein at the Chicago airport. We started talking about the B'nai Abraham facility. He says, send us some documents. Maybe there's something that we can do to help facilitate, the operation of that and help with that in some way. I know that we compiled a bunch of information from the Friends of the B'nai Abraham facility, and then got some more documents in which our city administrator sent along to Mr. Rubenstein for consideration. And so my question, but have we heard anything back from Mr. Rubenstein at all? So I know that he's pondering a potential, making some inquiries and determining whether or not they can help in some way in which to facilitate this. I indicated to him at that brief meeting at the Chicago airport that the city of Virginia, that the majority of the council was opposed to accepting the donation from the B'nai, and we were in a mode where we're sending out RFPs and looking for somebody to maybe take over that facility, and we would help as a conduit facilitate that moving forward. And so I guess that's where we're at now, but I really think this is a missed opportunity. I know the general public, I've heard from a lot of people at the different the different places I go, the restaurants, the coffee shops. I'm sure you all heard the same. And there's a group that are adamantly opposed to the city in any way, shape, or form having any involvement whatsoever in this facility. But I really think that, I think we should still continue to try to find a way in order to salvage that facility and help, sustain and identify and recognize the history of that for years to come. I think we have the responsibility as a city in which to do that. There's concern about the North End building, about the fact this was a historical site, and that the county owned this building. We had no control over it for the most part. They decided they wanted to take it down. There was a lot of opposition to that, of taking it down. Now there's opposition to salvaging this and having the city help salvage it, but I think we have a responsibility to find a way to work forward in which to do that. And that's, I have a couple more comments I'd like to make, but let's move on to the council. I think Councilor Bearable was first, and then on to Councilor Paulson. Thank you.
Mayor, I missed, unfortunately, I had
And
another...
Councilor Freely, excuse me.
I had another commitment for that last meeting, so I couldn't be there. But I am 100% opposed to not taking over that building. Okay, I think it is an opportunity. The building's 100% in compliance with all the ADA requirements, all the electrical, all the physical attributes that had to be approved when they did the remodeling on this particular building. We can spend all that money we spent on a downtown renovation of a building. It cost us, damn near $100,000 on 118. But yet we can't take over a minimal cost building that we can use for ancillary functions with this new miners coming up that can be used for offshoot meetings and everything else. The building that we took over on Silver Lake, that is having great success with having use of that particular building. You see it being used very often. And so what's the difference? And in that one, we put a lot of money into to fix that one up. So individuals that don't want to see us take a building that is of historical value in that particular case, I'm dead set against not taking this building over as a city and using it for functions that could be used. And there aren't really any restrictions that I see in the new agreement that I'm aware of for what we can have in there for functions. So I didn't see anything when I read this. So that's my opinion at this point in time. So I'm dead set against us just continuing. I think we need to take it over.
Yeah, thank you. Let's just move right down the line. We'll go with Counselor Freely, and then on to Counselor Paulson. Counselor Freely.
Well, from my standpoint, I'm impressed by what the Friends of B'nai Abraham have been able to do with that building, and it's the kind of thing that we would wish to have happen throughout our city. And it has happened, and the building, you're right, is in spit, shine, polished, preserved state to be utilized in a way that it already has been. I know at the last meeting there was a general consensus of sorts that the city, in fact, should not own it, based in part on Brian's projections and some other peripheral conversations with regard to personnel that would have to attend to that and whether or not we have those kinds of people on board already and could, extend the responsibilities of people that are already employed to do that. But when I left the meeting, I was of the impression that we would be facilitating the opportunity for some other entity or agency to take ownership of the building, maintaining the state of the building and the historical and cultural aspects of the building, and hopefully continuing the type of cultural activities that have been provided to the community through the Friends of B'nai Abraham. And I'm confident that we will have people right here in our own community that may have an interest in that and be able to do that for the benefit of the city without necessarily the city owning the building itself. Although I wouldn't be opposed to voting in favor of that myself, given that the building, in my opinion, is that valuable to the city's history. When you think in terms of the history of particularly downtown Virginia, Minnesota, it was established in large part by the very vibrant Jewish community that was here in the earlier years, and throughout my entire childhood for that matter. So I am of the mind that the building must be preserved, must be utilized in the capacity that it has been. I'm confident that there's going to be some entity, some agency, somebody that's going to be wanting to do that for us as a city. Not the city per se, but the city in general, I'm saying. And so I'm a little uncomfortable, I guess, after the lengthy discussion that we had and the consensus that we came to, that the current RFP indicates that we as a city would continue to own that building, be responsible for the maintenance and preservation of the building. I thought we were of the mind that the Friends of B'nai Abraham would retain the ownership of that building, while the city would then facilitate the opportunity for an RFP to engage with an entity to take over the building and run it as such. And I hate to sit on the fence, but I'm of the mind that I could swing either way. I mean, if we can put out an RFP and the Friends of B'nai Abraham are not objectionable to maintaining their ownership of the building, utilizing the facilitation of the city to seek RFPs and gain somebody to overtake that building, then I'm fine with that. If that is not their preference and they would like the city to take that over, I would not be opposed to that as well. I think, like you say, Mayor, it's not going to be seemingly that burdensome of a financial cost to the city to maintain that building, given the state that it's in currently. And I think there could be some additional information provided with newer projections and/or additional costs that we may incur in terms of personnel that would have to be associated with that building. So I hate to be sitting on the fence leaning either way, but I just think that the building in and of itself is absolutely essential to be preserved in this city. It already has been, to the tune of more than $500,000. It's a beautiful facility. It's got cultural and heritage significance, and it's a great venue for the types of cultural events that they've already had calendared throughout the years, and to see that continue in the city would be, I think, very advantageous. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Freely. Councillor Paulson.
Councilor Freely, very eloquently spoken. Thank you for that. I'm under the impression, and I'm not currently comfortable with the way this RFP is written. It was my understanding that the city would facilitate and not be an owner and not be in ownership. So as this is currently stated, I'm not comfortable moving forward, especially since I believe at that meeting, the city's wishes were made known. It was pretty clear, even though I wasn't in attendance of that specific meeting. I truly feel that the building is a beautiful building. It has every deservance of an entity coming in and preserving it and taking over. I truly don't feel like it's the city's responsibility, although I would be comfortable with the city moving forward on behalf of the B'nai Abraham, Friends of the Synagogue, in an RFP fashion, but I'm not comfortable in the current language as it's stated.
Yeah, thank you. Before we go on over to Councillor Beyondich, I guess I have a question. This is a request for proposal. So if we do this, Britt, this request for proposal, I did have a very brief conversation with our city attorney with respect to this. We send this out, request for proposals, as is. Say we get some proposals back. And part of the negotiation with those proposals might be a request for one of the entities that they would like to take it over. And if they're doing that, we're helping facilitate this request for proposal with the B'nai Abraham. So maybe the city doesn't have to own it. Maybe after a request for proposal comes back, that partnership can be dissolved between the city of Virginia and the B'nai and taken on by this other entity if the B'nai is satisfied with that. So is there some flexibility and options with respect to this? We are not committed to this agreement. We're just going out for RFPs. Is that correct?
We do have the option to deny, and
Okay, we do. So that's an important codicil in this agreement, that we don't have to. If we send this proposal, we're not committed to keeping this facility. We're committed to helping facilitate this. And as this progresses moving forward, with the city helping out, and which I think is important, we all think that's important to do, that we get an entity who may want to take it over. And I'll give you an example, and I haven't approached them on this. This is nothing that I'm asking them to do, but there's something like the Mesaba Symphony Orchestra as an example. They're an entity that they're asking for nonprofit office space, performing arts space, museum space, something that can be reserved for not only for the museum quality, but for the acoustics for performing arts in that regard. So there's a lot of things, the little plays, all those kind of things that they're trying to identify as being utilized. Now, the city doesn't have to own this building, but in the RFPs, if we could send this RFP out, we're not committed to ownership of the building. We're just committed to help facilitate this. And we don't have to be committed to owning the building, but I think in interest of moving the ball forward, we've been back and forth with the language of this RFP. I think moving forward, we have the option of not having to be an owner or a participant in the ownership of this facility. Let's send the RFPs out and see where it comes back. If nothing comes back, there's no harm, no foul. There's no commitment on anybody's part, and we're back to square one. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it a little bit moving forward. And even though there's some language in here, and I agree with Councillor Paulson, there's some language in here that's that can trying to looks at the city would be considering conveying the property. This is just part of the RFP. This isn't a purchase agreement. This isn't a commitment on the city to do so. This is simply a request for proposal in partnership with the city moving forward with the B'nai Abraham. And so as this evolves over time, if we get some entities that are involved, this an agreement later on down the road, it can change, who is the owner of this facility moving forward. Is that correct? Thank you. Counselor Beyondich.
After sitting through the meeting, for those of us who were there, I think it was clear how this was to be put together. This, I'm in agreement with Counselor Paulson that the language in this does need to be changed. What I'm afraid of is if we leave it, it may or may not go through, and suddenly the city will own it. And that is not what the meeting was about. That is not what we discussed. I do believe also that this should be changed, that the city would not be taking over the Benai, that it would be put out for RFPs. It is a beautiful building. A lot of work has been done to it, but I still believe another entity should own it, not the city, not a taxpayer's dollar going into this. We will be burdened with other buildings coming down the pike. We will be approached by other entities, and one of which I'm a member of. And that is also a historic building brought right up to code. So where will this end? We have done other things to other buildings, and you keep saying, well, we put money into another building, it didn't work. Why do we keep doing this? This is taxpayer money. This is taxpayer dollar. When this money runs out, we have to hire somebody to book events as a city. We will have to have city workers maintaining that building. This $50,000 does not last forever. And the other entities that have been approached realize that. And that may be the reason they're not comfortable coming forward to take it. We as a city, I do not believe should be owning this. It is a beautiful building. It's been well maintained. It's been brought right up. Why are other entities not coming forward to do that? The RFP should be changed the way it was taken at the meeting and before it goes out. I'm not comfortable letting this go out the way it is. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor Beyondich. Counselor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may ask, what other entities were at the meeting that were of potential interest to taking it over? Were there any other entities there?
No, the Historical Society was invited to come to the meeting to listen to the presentation by the B'nai. They already have some exhibits over there, and they were invited to take a look at, the potential of partnering with the B'nai moving forward. They were uncomfortable doing that because they didn't have the funding for that. They were going to seek some assistance from the St. Louis County Historical Society and maybe looking at that from that perspective. But no other entity has been approached. No other entity has been advertised for. That's the purpose of this RFP in which to do so.
And is that I'm trying to understand what the city's obligation is. Is it the city's obligation to put out RFPs for private entities?
No, it's not an obligation.
So I guess I'm a little confused as to why it feels like it is an obligation currently, especially in the current language presented, that the city should actually step in. I'm a little confused as to why the Friends of the Synagogue haven't put together their own RFP or their own succession plan. It's a little concerning to me.
Well, I can maybe clarify that for you a little bit, Councilor Paulson. At that meeting, we talked about, the partnerships and what can be done, and it was like a brainstorming session for the most part, moving forward. But it was our city attorney who recommended that the city help facilitate the RFP moving forward for the B'nai because of the historical significance of that and the fact that they were going to convey it, and there's some additional monies set forward for that. So it was our city attorney's suggestion that we help facilitate this through the RFP. It wasn't the B'nai who requested this. It was actually our city attorney who suggested that we move forward. And we all agreed that it was a good idea to take a look at it and determine whether or not that's possible, that we have a fiduciary responsibility for arts and entertainment and culture and museum quality buildings that have been up to speed that needed no other investment moving forward. That was one of the reasons why they thought that we could help facilitate this, this matter. I think does that answer your question a little bit?
It does.
Okay, thank you.
So basically, it's just, this was trying to bridge this gap. And I feel like it's not really the city's responsibility to be reaching out in this fashion if the city is not truly interested in acquiring the property. Now, I don't know as a council body if we've had that further discussion, but if the city is not truly interested in acquiring the property, I don't feel it's in the city's interest to conduct an RFP process.
Okay, thank you. So I think the question before us today is, I'll go to Councilor Bearable in a moment if I may. The question today is that this is the RFP. This is the one that was sent back by Benet in answer to what RFP was. And this is our job today is to determine whether or not we want to send this off or not, if we'll make changes or not. If we want to send it back to the Benet with some changes or not. So I think that's the purpose of that, and I think we've had some really good discussion about, there's actually one specific codicil in this agreement that has some angst for some of the councilors, and that is the city's acquisition of that property. So we're looking at making some other changes. So my question to the council would be that in the event that we want to continue helping the Benet Abram moving forward with the RFP, would we want to send back another RFP that we were comfortable with, or not send the RFP out at all and just sever ties with them? That's the decision we'll have to make today, I think. Councilor Bearable.
This is going to go on argument for quite some time. How many people were at that last meeting? Because I missed it. I know Julianne missed it. Carl, did you make it?
I'm
So
sorry,
how can you say that there was a consensus then when there are that many people and councilors missing in that meeting? That bothers me. But here's the suggestion.
Run that by me again about the problem with the consensus.
Well, there were half the council was missing at that last meeting that you had, when you came up with a consensus to go out for an RFP.
There were 4 of us.
There were
All four, did all 4 vote for that?
Yes. Yes. So
Okay, but there was no argument from the other side, which is not really fair. But let's get away from that.
Okay, I just wanted clarification for the public purpose that there was enough there to vote.
But there wasn't enough there it's not really a purchase, so you don't.
No, it was just a brainstorming discussion at that time. There was a council meeting that
Why
was
don't we,
scheduled.
why don't we do this? If you can all listen a little bit attentively here, and instead of thinking we're idiots because we want to take over this building, why don't we send out a proposal to the Benet Abraham that we do a public-private ownership partnership for that building, okay? Instead of just a public ownership of that building. See if there's anybody interested in the private sector to own it in 50-50 with the city, and eventually, if it works out, take it over. They share all the costs, share everything that's out there with maintenance and et cetera, with that, because then you have a building that's basically maintenance-free right now, because they don't have any upgrades by code or anything they have to do. That would be my suggestion to get off this dead center, because it's going to be a big argument before this is over with. And this would at least see if there's interest out there in that. And that's not illegal to do, to have a public-private partnership and ownership. You just have to figure out how you're going to do it legally, because they're going to do stuff like that with the new school system. They're going to have private public ownership of some of the processes with the new school. So that's my thought on it. And I could go along with that to see if we can get anything back. But I can't go along if we're going to just assist in going out for an RFP for a different ownership. That's my point. Think about that for a minute.
And I think there was some discussion at that meeting about public-private partnerships and trying to find a private partner to help partner with the city. That was one of the purposes of this RFP to moving forward. That's all part of it.
RFP states that we're looking for somebody to partner with the city.
Yeah, that's what the RFP says. Right.
Or there's an or, and this is what I think where Councilor Paulson was alluding to, that person can either purchase the building or work into a partnership with the city. And that's the question that I have, is my understanding was there was not to be a partnership with the city, we were gonna stay out of it. Mr. Milovitz and I have gone back and forth on that discussion, and I told him I would come to the council today for clarification again.
Thank you, Councilor Burbu. We'll go to Councilor Freely, and then to Councilor Barnzelli, and then to Councilor Beyondich. Councilor Freely.
Well, in the time that I've been on the council, we've put taxpayer money into purchases of properties already that are sitting abandoned and empty. A couple $100,000 for an abandoned and empty hotel up in Midway, another $90,000 for a rocky hilltop in Midway, with the speculation that those properties potentially would be advantageous to the city for development. So, we do put money into things with speculative means in the event that we would potentially benefit from them. I see those two more burdensome to the city myself right now than this building. How often is a historical museum that's been renovated to the tune of over $500,000 being offered as a gift to the city? Like I said, something that we would wish to be happening throughout the city. Not to mention, we put money, like Charlie mentioned, into the main street on 118. We also purchased other properties uptown as well that remain empty and abandoned, that are causing some cost to taxpayers to some degree through the city. I picture this building continuing to be used in the fashion that it has been, potentially even providing revenue to the city, or at least to the entity that takes it over, whether it's in combination with the city or as sole ownership. And actually following the conversation, or I had conversations following the meeting, one of the individuals that is of the member of the Friends of the B'nai Abraham indicated just in casual conversation that, geez, if really nobody comes forward, I'd have an interest in purchasing this building and seeking some assistance to continue the type of programming that's availed to the city. So I'm of the mind that even if we were the owners of this building, it doesn't necessarily mean that we will be from here till forever the owners of that building. It's real estate property that could be put up for sale to some other entity that may want to purchase it from the city. So I'm of the mind that it's not that often that this kind of gift is afforded to a city that has the significant historical significance that this building does have in this city. Certainly somewhat to my family. I do have some personal feelings with regard to that. But beyond that, just from a public perspective, I mean, this building is no longer and never will be utilized as a house of worship. And so if that enters into anybody's mind in terms of like the separation of church and state and so on and so forth, that's a moot point at this point with regard to this beautiful building that's being afforded to the city as a gift. It's actually right now a cultural and heritage museum. And all of us have been in there, and you can't help but be impressed by what's been done to that building and the artifacts that are available to the city to come and look at, and the historical placards and so on that are already there. The opportunity for those to be changed out on occasion to educate our community in various ways with regard to the Jewish community that once was incredibly vibrant in this community. I think it would be an opportunity lost, to be honest with you, with regard to what we're attempting to see happen within this city has happened. And the possibility does exist, Maya, that there may be other buildings that become available to us in the city. Whether or not they're going to have the same level of historical significance, whether or not they're going to have the same level of investment that's been made into this building, remain to be seen. And we as a city then, when that comes around, would have to make decisions in terms of whether or not it meets the criteria by which we decide to move forward on purchasing or owning those types of buildings. That's a kind of conversation we've had with regard to the other purchases that we made that, like I say, sit empty and abandoned with the speculation that someday it's going to be valuable to the city. This thing already is valuable to the city. I've attended a couple of the events there. Right now, it's shut down for the winter, and it's essentially shut down for that continuation of the kinds of events that have been availed to the city. And I think that's a huge loss to the contingent of people that really enjoyed the kinds of offerings that were availed there. And I really see that there's a lot of other offerings that could be availed there, from classes that could be afforded downstairs in that meeting room, in arts and crafts, to dance, to yoga, to whatever. And the upstairs, like Mayor has mentioned, is a beautifully acoustically sound entertainment area that could carry on musical events that may no longer be available to the city like they have been. For example, down at the 218, my understanding is that the doors are going to be locked and closed on that. And I attended multiple events at that venue and thoroughly enjoyed the kinds of entertainment that was available to the city there that potentially could be transitioned over to this building because it's complementary to the types of events that they offered. And so in any event, I just, it's not that often that a city is availed the kind of opportunity that we've been availed by the Friends of B'nai Abraham for the significant historical type of building that's being afforded to us. And I would not be opposed to the city in some combination having some part ownership in establishing and facilitating that other entity or that other individual to take over that building and the type of programming it could offer, and eventually then backing out of that and allowing them to take over and selling it to them with whatever interest we might have in it. But truth is, it's being granted to us for nothing in addition to $50,000 operating expenses, which is true is not going to last that long when you talk in terms of like the maintenance and the utilities and so on. But I still don't picture that as burdensome as maybe other people perceive to be, given the kind of revenues that could be brought forth by the events that could be available there. So I'm of the mind that it is a gift that's being afforded to the city. I don't picture it as being a burdensome gift to the taxpayers in any remote aspect, to be honest with you, at this point. So I'm of the mind that maybe the wording is not such in the RFP that we've looked at right now that was not the consensus of the council necessarily, Charlie, but the consensus of the people that were in attendance at the meeting to some degree, I think, was, you know, maybe the city would be better off finding somebody else to do this, but if we're the ones facilitating that, I'm fine with that. Having sole ownership of it is not part of the RFP that's being presented, my understanding. Not at all. It would be in partnership. And like I say, we could then step back out of that partnership should this thing flourish, as I hope it will, as a cultural event center of sorts within the city, and not be burdensome to the Park and Rec Department or the personnel that we have in place through the city. I anticipate that we would find a way to make this something that continues to be viable and valuable to the city, and not burdensome to the taxpayers in any sense. I stand.
Thank you, Councilor Fraley. Councilor Barnzelli.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'm sorry I missed that Friday afternoon meeting at 1 o'clock. It was 3 weeks ago?
No,
Month?
no. Quite a few months ago. Few months back.
2 months?
Few more.
Well, I guess I said this the first time we discussed this. I grew up, I could throw a tennis ball from my front porch to that building. And I'm not, the church is excellent, but I don't want to see us owning it. If I can help sell it, if anybody ever asks me wherever I am, absolutely, it's an excellent church. In fact, now the lights are on all night long in the building. I go up Fourth Avenue to go home, and it's really a good-looking building. But $50,000, like you said, Counselor, that isn't going to last very long. I would like to be the salesman for that parcel, for that building. We could go around trying to sell it, but I'm not in favor of taking it on. We've got our main street that I want to have developed. I'm not saying that that's bad. It's a good. It's an excellent building, but I don't think the city should be involved with taking it on and using it, or just taking it on to sell. I think we could partner with the Benai people and work toward finding somebody for them to take it. But I can't, I don't want to support this for the city of Virginia to taking it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Beyondich.
I'll drag this out a little longer.
Sure. Yep, that's what we're here for.
I have no doubt that this gift that they're giving, that another entity wouldn't take it. I mean, it's a beautiful building. I still don't feel like the city should own it. What happened in the past with purchasing properties, buildings that were all going to make money? How long can we continue to do this? I mean, things have been done in the past, buildings have been purchased, they sit empty. Property has been purchased, nothing came of it. So I just don't see the city continuing to do that. At some point, there is no money. Being in business, we know that every day. I've been in business for a long time. When there's no money coming in, there's no money that can go out. You can't keep asking for more money. We have an advisory group for the greenhouse, and they came back to this council and said absolutely not, because that's where part of this funding for maintaining that building is coming from. As a council, we totally ignored that. We did. There was no conversation. When they came forward and Mr. Silver came and told us what was said, we continued down that road. Why would anybody be on a group? We're not even listening to the people who have hands on this project. We as a council are making those decisions. Why would anybody be on a board or a committee? We're not even taking that into consideration. We want people to be on them, we want their input, but if it's not the input that we want to hear, we just ignore it.
Please continue.
That's all I have to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Mayor, I have a rebuttal.
Yeah, I have a lot to say
So do I.
about that, a lot to say about that, because I think, okay, go ahead, Councilor Bearable.
You know, I'm not going to point fingers or anything, but why do you think we're putting all this money into the Virginia Economic Development Authority, dollars with a levy, with all kinds of other dollars for buildings that are either empty or remodeling for individuals that have businesses in downtown? There's a lot of money there. We've gone after grants, we've gone everything, and we've got a perfectly sound, 100% functional building that we're not willing to do anything with, where we're willing to spend tons of money on entities that may never happen. We're sitting, nobody's purchased that 118 building yet that I'm aware of. Have they, Britt?
In process.
We have a
In process, okay.
agreement on Thursday.
But we're putting money in there. We put $65,000 a year into a levy that the taxpayers are paying. We're putting in lots of taxpayers' dollars into buildings in this community that aren't owned by the city. So why shouldn't we take a look and find a partnership with the city on a perfectly 100% viable building that's already there and 100% useful, and in the future look at with agreements with the Benai individuals of what type of entity. They've got it stated in here, nonprofit, performing arts, or musical, or museum space. There's entities out there that are willing to do this. I can't see continuing, if we're gonna not look at a 100% viable building, putting money into what we're doing already. We're putting in hundreds of thousands of dollars into buildings that need remodeling and businesses that absolutely need to redo and remodel their buildings. So don't anybody say we're not spending money as a city on entities within the city and buildings. I 100% disagree with that. Doing streets is an entity that we spend lots of money that benefit businesses. Also, because it makes the traffic flow easier and parking is better. We're doing all kinds of stuff in the city. That's our responsibility to upgrade our city. But not taking a look at a building that's already 100% building code-wise compliant, I can't see it. I don't disagree. If we look for a public-private partnership for this, but we need to go out and do it with an RFP that would have this in with the criteria that, and it's not so bad once you read the in-depth. There's only a couple things in this that are sitting there that aren't good, but I could go along with that to see what we can come up with. We haven't had any takers yet, correct? Yeah, we haven't put it out. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to Councilor Paulson, I just want to say that, we are a landlocked community. When property becomes available, no private entity wants to purchase it. We're looking for the future of our children, the future of our community, and making an investment now so we don't have to make an additional investment in the future. So say we buy a piece of property now. Well, maybe we're not going to be able to develop it right now. But 10 years down the road, when our kids and grandkids are growing up, we have this opportunity for economic development. If we had lots of land outside of this community that we could expand it and offer economic development to, we would do that. But we don't. So we try to take advantage of those opportunities when they arise. And so we've done that in the past, and I think we've had a fiduciary responsibility and been fiscally responsible in many of these areas. Now, the 118 Chestnut Street, I think the city, through VITA, has about $48,000 into that. Other monies come from the Brownfield, other monies came from the Virginia Foundation, other monies came from the IRRB. So we have that opportunity to glean into other investment opportunities to help develop certain entities moving forward. So I think, and then, we ask our staff, when we're considering a project, we ask our commissions, we ask our staff, what do you think? What are the challenges you see? What are what is the factual basis? I don't base my decisions on personal opinions. I base my decisions on fact. The fact is that as an example, our Park and Rec director laid out what he felt was the annual cost associated with that based on his best estimate. And I appreciate that. I don't dispute it. That's what we ask them for. We gather all the facts. Our job, it's not that we're not listening to them, we are. Our job is to glean all the information from all these entities and make a sound decision based on what we think is the best interest, not only for the short term of our value of our community, but for the long-term value of our community. So when we purchase properties that are not salvageable and we spend $17,000, $18,000, $20,000, $30,000 on demolishing those properties, what is our investment there? The investment is it's elimination of blight. It's supposedly an improvement of the our way of life, the safety of our community, the insurance that there's not squatting going on in there. And then we make these investments and these improvements in our city, and I think we do that. So we're talking about one entity here. We're not talking about all the other entities. What's before us today is this RFP. Do we want to send this RFP out, or do we not want to send this RFP out? We've had significant discussion in opinions of all levels on what we should do, what we shouldn't do, and try to leverage other questionable purchases that we're not using properly. Well, I disagree. I think we are using these properly. That's why we're investing in it. We're listening to our boards. We're listening to VEDA. We're listening to VEDA. We're listening to our Park and Rec Department. We're listening to our Park and Rec Commission. We're listening to them. They are an advisory board. They advise us. They don't make a decision. We make that decision. So we glean all that information out. It's not that we're not listening to them. We are listening. Sometimes we approve those recommendations. Sometimes they have more weight than others, but it's not we don't listen. We do listen. Believe me. I know I do. And so I value the opinions and of our commissions, no matter where they are, and our city staff and our workers. So our job is not to make an opinion about whether or not we're listening to them. Our job is to make a decision on what's in the best interest of the city. And so this is what's before us today, not our past purchases. It has no merit, has no boundaries for that. It's this. Do we want to send this out, or do we not want to send this out? And if you want to make some changes or not, that's the decision that's before us today. We all have our opinions. We've all expressed them. But as a group, we have to decide what we think is in the best interest of the city based upon all the information that we've gleaned from our commissions, from our city staff, from our directors, and from our department heads. And that's what we're here today. We have all that information now. That's why this went up. That's why this is proposed already, because we listened. So I think we do listen moving forward. So before we go to Councillor Paulson, I'd like to bring up Terry Hardica. He's asked to give a little bit of information. Would you mind, Councillor Paulson, if we hear from him first? Thank you.
I was just thinking I was in the same position as whoever owns the synagogue building. Last year when we put the Mako up for sale as a former church, and just throw this in the mix, if you will, a fellow from Florida finally bought the building and moved up here, and he's living in the building now, restoring it for the purpose of making it an event center. So if the Mako is going to be an event center and this building is going to be an event center, they're going to be in competition with one another. And I don't, you have to throw that in the mix. And as I look at the whole process, I'm seeing that it's going to come down to an individual. And whether it's a nice building or not, whether it's this or that, somebody is going to have to make it move forward. And maybe this fella that's bought the Mako isn't going to make it move forward, and you might consider buying the Mako too. I don't know. I wish I would have had this discussion with you last year, but I think it would be nice to, think about that as far as maybe doing some more research into it.
Sure.
That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hardick. Appreciate it. Thank you. Councillor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So, I agree with a lot of the conversation with both sides going on here. So just to go back to the facts, if we're talking about facts, is the B'nai Abraham, in fact, a nonprofit entity that can, in fact, go out for its own RFPs?
Yes.
So why does the city have to get involved? If we're just talking about facts and they're looking for an entity, whether it's a public city entity or a private entity, and they have the ability to go out for an RFP, why are we taking this on? I guess I'm getting a little frustrated with the whole tone of this dialogue. If it's their intention that they want to have their building preserved, and it's the city's intention that the city does not wish to own this property, but we all wish to see it maintained and we all wish to see programming, I think we all have the best interest of, of the historical preservation, but they are a nonprofit entity, which they can enter into RFPs or send out RFPs. I'm not sure, so like for an example, the Judy Garland Museum in Grand Rapids, or the Children's Museum in Grand Rapids, that's not tied to the city of Grand Rapids. Those are private museum, they have a board, they both have private boards. They both have memberships, they have its own, I mean, it's a closed entity, it's a nonprofit entity. I'm not really understanding what this request is, although I'm happy to go out to try to help them. I mean, you know, it's a wonderful building. I just don't understand why we are getting in the mix if the city is not truly interested in acquiring the property. So that's one of the points that I have to make. The second point that I have to make is if it is a nonprofit, or if it is a museum and we're doing programming and the city is to obtain it, the argument, in my opinion, that would be made for the downtown renovation program that Vita just put together is that the city is investing in businesses that are going to generate tax revenue to be brought forward to the city to have those dollars, where you're talking about a museum type of an operation that will not ever generate tax dollars unless you're having people from the outside come to an event and go have dinner somewhere and there's a ripple effect. But what we're doing in terms of economic development with those 0.1% of the levy, that's going into private development to be able to build more tax base up, in my opinion. So I don't think that it's a comparison in any way, shape, or form. But if they are truly, in fact, a nonprofit entity that can put forth their own RFPs, I don't know why the city is even involved in this. So that's my point. I want to see it succeed. I feel that it has amazing acoustics. I feel like it has an amazing opportunity, but I don't feel that that is the city's responsibility to take that on. And I'm a little frustrated with where we're going with this. I'm sorry.
Just to clarify a little bit here, we don't have to do this. We can just say, no, we're not going to send the RFPs out. You know, we feel that this is something that the city doesn't want to take over. We don't want a partnership with you on this. We think this is an RFP. If you want to sell the building and you want some stipulations on how it's going to be used, you could put out your own RFP. And that was discussed at this meeting, that this could help. This could be the case where they could do this themselves. And at that brainstorming meeting, we could have said, no, you know, we don't want to be involved in it. But it was a recommendation on the part of our city attorney says, why don't we see if we can work something out to help facilitate finding somebody else to purchase this building, to help facilitate the RFP, that we'd be willing to bear some commitment or some partnership to do so. We don't have to do this. They can do this on their own. We can just say, you know what, it's not working out. You know, the city doesn't want to take ownership of this. I think that seems to be the general consensus of everyone. And that they can put out their own RFPs. We will try to help you in any way we can. But, you know, this is a private entity. You own it. We encourage and we support, you know, your efforts here. And whatever we can do as a city to help you facilitate that, we will. That was part of the conversation. That's where this came down to the RFP. So we can continue by making a change and put this out, or we can vote as a council to say, you know, thank you, but I don't think this RFP is going to work out. I think we've decided we no longer to partner with you on this regard. We wish you all the very best. And if there's anything we can do outside of this, we'd be more than happy to help. So I think that's kind of where we're at. And the point that you make is valid. I think the discussion at that meeting was that reason. You know, we were going to try to help them do that because they didn't have the means to do it. The board was consistent of people who are of elderly age, and they were unable to continue to operate as a board, and they were looking for some way in which to preserve their investment. And by making this offer to the city was one of those ways to move forward. It's enveloped into that, but it doesn't have to. They can do their own. They're going to find some other way in which to move that forward. So I think the point you make, Councilor Parson, is valid. Thank you. Anybody else? Counselor Freely.
And I don't want to reiterate exactly what you were saying, but that's the case, is these are people that are now well into their 80s, and they spent the last 15, 20 years on this project, investing in this project, and now it becomes kind of a logistics type of thing for them to come up from the cities to do these kinds of connections that need to be, the network that needs to be developed to pull this off, so to speak. But that's kind of where we're at with those people, is they restored this building, offered it as a gift to the city, and it's certainly not, it shouldn't be like they're dumping it on the city in some fashion, that it's going to be some burden on the city in some fashion, because I don't picture that at all. But this is new information for Mr. Hardica too, that I wasn't aware. That's the thing, like I didn't know what was going into the mall until I see the Hobby Lobby semis there. I mean, there's a lot of information that we're not afforded along the way that would help us make decisions, I think. You know, knowing that there's a private entity now that's taking over the Mako Theater and maybe creating a event center there, that's new information that needs to be known, because the reality is there could be some competition there with regard to what kinds of events could be afforded. With regard to that, though, I have heard some interest in the possibility of non-alcoholic types of events being offered in the city. And that was one of the things that was discussed about, because of the location of the B'nai Abraham building, the restoration of the building, how it can be utilized. That would be a perfect place for that type of opportunity to be availed, as opposed to like the events downtown, for example. And the kinds of events that have been afforded at the B'nai Abraham, I think would be applicable to the non-alcoholic crowd, to be honest with you. So there is an application that could be utilized through the B'nai Abraham that is not necessarily in competition with that, which would be downtown. So in any event, I'm of the mind that, yes, I agree that the B'nai Abraham, Friends of B'nai Abraham have afforded us a gift to the city. How we want to move forward with that gift is up to us as a council. I don't know that we're going to be burdened moving forward with the RFP as it's currently stated. We could adjust it accordingly as necessary. But the key factor is that this is a building that's been restored. It's something we want to have happening throughout the city. It's already been done. It comes with an additional gift of $50,000 in operating expenses, which would then go to the person or entity that takes it over also. So I just don't see this as being that controversial of a decision to make, given the state of the building that we're being offered.
Thank you. So the question today is, do we want to move forward with this RFP or not? Do we want to actually do an RFP or not? Or do we want to send this back? The staff needs to know what we want to do. So, Councillor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Given the, I guess, the conversation and just understanding that they actually, in fact, have their own ability to put forth RFPs, with that understanding, I'd like to make a motion that the city completely sever ties with the Friends of B'nai Abraham moving forward in any capacity of the city putting out an RFP. I would recommend that the Friends of the B'nai put their own RFP out. And
Thank you.
I'll make that motion.
That's in the motion. Councillor Paulson makes the motion to sever our partnership with the B'nai in offering some assistance in putting an RFP and notifying B'nai that they will be responsible putting the RFP. That's kind of what the motion is. Councillor Paulson, thank you. Is there support for that?
I'll support.
Support by Councillor Beyondich. Is there any further discussion? Do we have any more further discussion? Councillor Bearable.
Now, if we pass this, and I'm not going to vote for this in the positive, then what happens when we have requests from other entities that come before? We will set a precedent right now if we don't at least go out and help this outfit. You're setting a bad precedent for this city when it comes to business in this community. Even if it's public-private ownership, it's a bad precedent. I think we should at least go out. All the stuff that's in this doesn't have to be acted on. It still comes back for decision-making process. I could go along with this with a couple of modifications in the original, but I can't go along with what Counselor Paulson is putting on, because I think it's bad for the rest of the business. It'll come to haunt us when it comes to loan processes, when it comes to everything else in this city, if we don't take a look at this from a positive perspective. And it's going to haunt us in the end. I've been around a long time, and I've seen these things happen before. And all of a sudden, you're gonna see something I hate to say, but I want to say it. You're going to start looking at what it represents between public and religious affiliation type things with the stuff that goes on throughout this country. So I can't go along with this motion.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Bearable. Further discussion, Counselor Freely, and then we'll go on to Counselor Paulson. Counselor Freely.
I guess I have to agree with Charlie. I mean, when you have a group of individuals who in the last 20 years have invested their heart and soul and money and time into the restoration and preservation of a significantly historical building in town, and then, like I said, it's something that we're wishing for and hoping for and wanting in this city to be done throughout the city. The one time since I've been sitting here that it has been afforded to us, we're going to say thanks but no thanks. I don't think it bodes well for the future of these kinds of potential offerings or investments being made in the city when we throw our hands up and say we're not interested in you doing that for us, because they're not really doing it to us, they're doing it for us. So I just don't think that moving forward in that capacity is sending the right message to the people that are wanting to come to Virginia, Minnesota and reinvest in this city and restore this city and rehabilitate this city and do the things that we're hoping for and praying for to happen in this city. It just did down on 4th and 5th over the last couple decades, and I could not move forward with saying thanks but no thanks. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Freely. I have a question before we, I'm sorry, Counselor Paulson.
Thank you. I don't actually feel like we're setting a precedent. I feel like it's just kind of black and white. They are a nonprofit entity that can enter into RFPs at will, at any time. I can totally I could see us as a city group or a body putting together a letter of support for an RFP that they decide to put out. And I'd be fully in support of that, and I'm not trying to shut down conversation. I'm just saying I don't feel like we're setting a precedent in any way, shape, or form if a nonprofit entity has the same ability, is afforded the same ability as a city to be able to do it, to put out their own RFPs. I'm not sure why the city has to help facilitate that. With private businesses or private entities, I don't think a private entity, well, I suppose they could, but it's not the same when you're as a nonprofit. So I just feel like it's not part of the city's obligation, and you know, we could be getting gifted tons of buildings. I could gift you my building paid for. I mean, I guess I'm not really understanding why we feel like we're setting a bad precedent. They are a nonprofit. They have a board. They can, in fact, put out their own RFP. So I guess I'm just sticking with that. I'm not trying to say it's not a viable opportunity for someone, but I feel that that viable opportunity would be someone either in the private sector or someone that the Friends of B'nai put out their own RFP and find that entity.
Thank you, Counselor Paulson. I guess I have a question before we move forward with any additional discussion and a potential vote on this motion. Not that I don't think this motion should go forward for a vote, because any motion on the floor with a second should go for a vote, but we have one counselor that's not here today. This is a very controversial issue. This is a very important issue. So my question would be, you know, I mean, I guess my thoughts are that maybe Counselor Johnson, who has another commitment, unfortunately can't be at this meeting today. This is a very important vote, and I think we should all have that opportunity to vote. But that being said, there is a motion on the floor and a second. So you want to continue moving forward with the motion, Counselor Paulson? Okay, and you continue with your second, Counselor Beyondich? Very good. Is,
Point of clarification, it will be forwarded to the council meeting next week for the full vote to the full
okay,
council.
very good, thank you. A very good point, thank you. And Counselor Johnson, I think we should probably have this same discussion at that level to bring Counselor Johnson up to speed. So it's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Counselor Bearable?
It'll only move forward if it gets passed here. That's the only way it'll get moved forward. So
That's
we
right.
could, you know, it could be a split vote here with no passage too, and then it's done. So keep that in mind.
It'll still be on the agenda for next week as part of the recap of the meeting.
Clarify that for me one more time, please.
It'll still be on the agenda next week as part of the recap of the meeting of today. Whether-
Be a recap, but if it doesn't move forward, there's no vote at the council meeting.
There certainly could be a vote at the council.
There could
meeting.
be?
If the council makes a motion.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That clarifies things, right? Thank you. Thank you, Pam. Okay, it's been moved and supported. Councilor Paulson moved and supported by Councilor Beyondich to sever ties with B'nai Abram on the RFP and notify B'nai to move forward with their own structure with whatever they deem necessary. That kind of capsulizes it a little bit. Is that about correct? I know that's kind of a, okay, and is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Roll call, please.
Baranzelli? Huffy?
No.
Baraboo?
No.
Reedley? Paulson?
Yes.
Beyondich?
And Councilor Johnson is absent. Motion fails 4-2. Thank you. Okay. Pardon?
Excuse me.
Yeah, is another motion? Yes, Councilor Beyondich.
I think Mr. Barnzelli is,
Okay, Councilor Barnzelli? You did?
Did.
Okay, oh, you can change that. Can you? You can. You can change it if you want.
Vote.
Huh? Okay, let's redo the vote. Thank you. Okay, we'll start over again.
Baranzelli? Huffy?
No.
Baraboo?
No.
Reedley? Paulson?
Yes.
Beyondich?
A motion fails 3-3. Thank you. Next, wait, you just have something there, Counselor? No? Okay. Next item, please.
Just a reminder, this will go to the council meeting next week.
Yeah.
Session there.
So does the full, Britt, the full resolution that's there go forward too?
The RFP?
Yeah. Okay.
If it's okay with the council, I'd like to bring up the contract for professional services with Steve Fingeroo, since we have Brian in the audience. We can get Brian back on with his day. Steve Fingeroo's contract expires December 31st, I believe. Is that correct, Brian?
March 31st.
So it's coming up quick. And he would-
Thank you for your patience, Brian, and welcome to the council meeting. Thank you.
As you are well aware, because you instructed us to begin negotiating a new contract with Stephen Fingeroo for the continued management of the golf course, his current contract is set to expire on March 31st. So he has sat down and come up with a new contract for him. It is a 3-year contract. Essentially, it also stated here a couple of months ago that would like to do a profit sharing clause with his contract. That clause is only in effect. It is based off of the net annual profit for the golf course. So if the golf course is operating in the historical data over the past 4 years for the golf course. In 2016, the golf course operated at a $155,000 deficit. In 2017, the golf course operated at a $192,000 deficit. 2018, the golf course operated at a $187,000 deficit. This year, the golf course has operated at a $61,000 deficit. So we are moving in the correct direction. Will assist further move
Thank you. I guess I'll start. This has been a long time coming. You know, this has been part of our audit for many years about the golf course, and because it's an enterprise fund that it needs to continue operating, and it's been kind of a negative projection through our auditing firm moving forward, and so it's nice to see this going down. I think there's many reasons for that. One is for your reassignment of priorities for the golf course, Brian, and your leadership as the Park and Rec Director. Number two, that Steve Fingerhus continues to operate in a professional manner, has the support of the community, and is implementing steps and programs that has been established by you in your leadership role as a Park and Rec Director to help reduce some of the costs associated with that. The two concerns that I have, I know you've included a 2% increase. One of the really main reasons why is because the condition of the golf course has improved so dramatically over the last 4 years, particularly the last year, about the membership, the users of the golf course, and that's primarily due to the improvements that were made, the modest improvements that were made in cooperation with the Park and Rec Department and Public Works to try and fix some of these things there, and they're continuing to do so. You're continuing with that partnership. And the second part of it is we have a greenskeeper, Joshua Kraus. And Josh Kraus has been a greenskeeper for 4 or 5 years now. And the condition of those greens have improved so dramatically that we have been recognized as a public golf course in northeast Minnesota and then throughout the state of Minnesota as a public golf course, have the best greens to play on, and that brings a lot of people up here. So when people come on vacation to play at Giants Ridge, when they come to play at the Wilderness at Fortune Bay, they come to Virginia and play the 18-hole golf course as well, because they know that the greens are in good shape. Are the fairways and everything compatible? Do they compete with the resort courses that can put $9-10 million a year in their courses? No. But for what our investment is, and what our workers do, and what the changes have been made from your part of the Park and Rec has really, that's why this has dropped to $61,000 a year. And what I anticipate with the incentive that you put in this contract will continue to drop. And we'd like to see us operate, at a profit, but if we get down to even, that'd be a great opportunity. So things have to continue to move forward. And then by making this adjustment, I know what our greenskeeper's salary is, and in order to maintain the professional services that he provides, because we've made every conceivable effort in the past to maintain these greens because they are very delicate based upon their foundation, not like the investments that were made in these other courses. And he's done amazing work with that, and we'd like to keep him. In addition to that, I think you've recognized, Brian, that the people who work at the golf course, who mow the grass, who clean the brush, who take care of the ponds and the sand traps and cut the greens and change out the holes, and all those people that work there, they were making less money. They were making like $9 and some cents an hour, which is a lot less money than we pay our casuals. And so you're making an adjustment to that too. This is Steve Fingerhus' contract. He has a responsibility to pay the greenskeeper, and I'm hoping that any adjustment that's been made based upon these modest increases that we're proposing for Mr. Fingerhus' contract, that some of that trickles down, particularly to our greenskeeper and those people who are making from $9.75 an hour or whatever they're making to, a palatable salary. Even though these people are volunteers, I mean, not volunteers, but they're, they're retired people, but they have a knowledge of that, and they have a commitment. And that commitment that was made, the commitment they do really good work. Now, they're just out there to just, rake a sand trap and then have a cigarette, or they work hard every day. And I got to say, plug in Mr. Kraus, who I don't know hardly at all. He's there from 6 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night. He's there on weekends, on holidays. He's doing all these things for that, what I consider to be a very modest salary that he makes. So thank you, Brian, for your commitment and your leadership here. And I fully support the recommendation for the modest 2% increase moving forward, because I think it's going to reap benefits for us. So I was on the bandwagon there, but I just wanted to say those things. Thank you. Councillor Paulson.
I just want to say thank you for halving that deficit. I think that's incredible. I really do. So good job to the whole team. I do have a question regarding the restaurant. I know are we at a break-even point with that? Do you follow or track that at all, or is that what? Or Sherry, is that your job?
Sherry, would you please answer that question for Councillor Paulson?
Right now, the restaurant is in arrears by $20,000. They owe us back for invoices from August to present.
So is the city continuing to pay invoices that?
They haven't paid their
for-
lease, they haven't paid their lease payments to us, nor the linens. So yes, we continue to pay.
Okay, I guess this is news. I did not know this. So
Brian's been meeting with them on this matter, and there's a dispute with we have a problem with the linen company, the city does, and so do they, where they have overcharged us by dramatic amounts of money. So there's some credits coming due to us from the company, not the
I did
restaurant
not mean
owners.
to rip off a Band-Aid here. I apologize. I really didn't know.
Well, the restaurant part of it is, we're in the restaurant part. I was speaking about the golf. We're at the restaurant
But I
part.
was just
Yes.
talking
Sure.
about the deficit, because with the rent that we had basically charged them was supposed to offset the utilities. So I was just assuming that would be a wash. But when this, now that we have it.
They're behind in their rent from August.
So that does take into consideration then arrears for the.
Does have a separate budget.
That's my question. Okay.
It's not part of the deficit. So that's
Okay.
A separate contract too with the restaurant.
But valid question.
Okay. Well, I'm happy that we're at a better number.
And
I,
it is largely due to absolutely wonderful to work with.
so glad to hear that. Thank you. And I guess I'll reserve the restaurant discussion for maybe another time. I'm sorry I have to bring that up.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Paulson. Councillor Bearable.
Brian, do you keep track of and have exact tabulation of where the deficiencies are for that loss of $60-some thousand, exactly where it's occurring in the golf course up there? Do you have a statistical data sheet on this, or does Sherry have that?
I do have it also as with our budget where we are in different lines.
Because I'd like to see that, just to make sure that we're not doubling over someplace and things that maybe we should be taking cost on and they shouldn't, from
Is
the professional
Is
standpoint.
depreciation part of this?
Depreciation is
There it
part
is
of
right
this.
there.
Oh, okay, that's probably the big part on there.
And I believe depreciation for this past budget year was around $25,000 to $30,000,
Okay.
but don't quote me on that.
And I have one other question, Brian. Did you go out and do a survey of other golf courses, what they're paying their greenskeepers, et cetera, to make sure this is enough money to keep our staff? Because you did do that.
And have also had open and honest discussions with our current staff. And
okay.
they are very receptive to this contract.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Bearable. Anybody else? Counselor Beyondich, Counselor Barnzelli? Anyone? Okay, so are we asking approval of this contract?
Mr. Mayor, I will make
Yes.
a motion. I've gone through this contract at home prior to the meeting, and I will move that we accept this current contract with the blessing of our park and superintendent. Thank you.
Okay, contract moved as presented for approval by Counselor Bearable. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Counselor Beyondich. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, motion carries.
Thank you, council.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian, for your effort on that, too. That's great. We'll back up to the review requests for proposals for city attorney. Sherry did provide information in the packet about the expenditures for the last years.
Sideways. I think I printed a copy off here. Yeah. I got it, I have it sideways in my, oh, here we go. We're good. Okay. You want to just give us a brief rundown? I've had an opportunity to look at it myself. I mean, I guess I can start. I mean, I looked at, there are really two law firms, I think, here that are in the running. From my personal perspective, both are local, Colosimo, Patchen and Kearney, and Trenti Law Firm. I'm looking at the proposals of each, and both of these law firms are excellent and well respected in this community. One of the questions that I have is looking at the monthly criminal retainer amount. There's a $85 per hour by Colosimo, Patchen and Kearney with a maximum of $6,000 per month, and the Trinity Law Firm at $100 an hour with no maximum. So that's a, or is that?
That is correct.
Yeah, there's a, if there was a cap of some sort, if criminal prosecution was to exceed, $6,000 a month, I know that they do misdemeanor prosecutions only, petty misdemeanors, and on occasion, gross misdemeanors, sometimes with DWIs and things like that. But any felony level offense is prosecuted by, of course, our county attorney's office, right?
And I would like to remind everybody that the RFP did state that we could do the general monthly retainer or the criminal together or separate. So we can hire two firms if we wanted to do, somebody to do our monthly retainer and somebody to do our criminal. That was part of the RFP.
And I just want to say real quickly before I move on with Councilor Paulson and the rest of the councilor that I know that whatever decision we make today, we should make that, obviously, but I know that not only from personal experience, but looking at the record of the prosecutions that were conducted by our current prosecutor for misdemeanors, which is Mr. Kearney, Mike Kearney, whose hourly rate is very reasonable. He's very professional. He's done the yeoman's work. I've been in court with him on many occasions over the years. I think he does really good criminal work for us, and I think we get a really good bang for our buck when it comes to prosecutions of these misdemeanor offenses. Thank you. Councilor Paulson.
Mayor, thank you, Britt, for clarifying that, because that was my one question. And I tend to agree with what you're saying, Mayor. Colosimo, I think, has done a great job with that entity, or with that side, the criminal side. I also feel that Brian Lindsay brings a lot to the table with municipal law. So with that being said, could I make a motion to retain Trenti for that portion and to retain Colosimo, Patchen, Kearney for the criminal portion?
Sure. You're making that motion, Councilor Paulson? Okay, thank you. Is there support?
I'll support.
Support by Councilor Bearable for the discussion. I do real quickly. Looking at both these law firms, which are very good, I look at, not only the civil litigation, but the potential for labor litigation as well. And so when we look at the labor litigation, who does labor work? The Colosimo, Patchen, Aronson, and Kearney, they have an individual by the name of Mitch Brunfeld, who has lots of experience in labor law, And so does the Trenti Law Firm as well. So the labor component is important too as moving forward. And both of these firms have, in the event that we would have to go to that route, they would have that.
We not use Pemberton for labor?
Do, because usually our labor, fortunately, our labor things that we do have are very large if they have them. And we hope to not have any this next year.
So does that, Sherry, go ahead.
If I can just add a comment. I've actually worked personally with Mitch Bernfeld on labor issues with the public utilities and very knowledgeable. And so it was, and I do respect Christie and the Pemberton Law Firm. They're awesome. They take the big ones. They're very efficient. But I think that we could probably utilize some of the staff on, like Mitch Bernfeld, that might lower our labor law costs. I know Christie, when you call her, the clock is going. And it isn't always so with Mitch.
And these two firms are whom? Christie is with Pemberton? And,
Mitch Broomfeld's with Classimo, Patch, and Kearney.
okay, Mitch. So do we need to have another entity in
No,
there? Or just
just the two. And I think that
Thank you for that
their hourly
clarification.
rates are very competitive.
I just wanted to make sure we had it covered.
We just had a discussion yesterday with another city about what their hourly rates are. They're paying for attorney out of the cities, and these are very competitive.
Okay, thank you for
Thank
that,
you.
Sherry.
Okay, any further discussion? I just have one more. Knowing that, whatever the retainers are, when we're looking for the monthly criminal retainer, we're looking at the Classimo, Patch, and Classimo, Patch, and Kearney. Brunfeld actually is for the criminal retainer, which is looking at the monthly retainer fee, which is, I think, the prudent motion moving forward from my perspective. Counselor Paulson, thank you. And then the Trenti Law Firm at, for the monthly retainer amount is $600 per month, and it includes, routine questions, of course, by phone, email, and 4 meetings, so that's pretty good. And then, of course, the hourly fee between $100 and $150 per hour, and none of them in the hourly fee has a cap on it. So I think these two motions for these two law firms will blend well together with our needs are. So thank you for that motion, Councilor Paulson, and support by Councilor Beyondich. Is there any further discussion in that regard? Councilor Bearable.
What did you say, Mayor, about the criminal prosecution that Mr. Kearney does? Is that the $5,000 retainer per month included in his fee too, or is that both?
No, they're separate.
They're separate. So the
Classimo, Patch, and Kearney criminal is $85 an hour with $6,000 maximum per month.
Okay, so that is that, okay.
And so if he has, 5 criminal cases, it's $85, right? Okay, very good, thank you. Okay, it's been moved and supported to hire the Classimo, Patch, and Kearney Brunfeld Law Firm for the criminal retainer and the Trenti Law Firm for the rest of the civil litigation moving forward. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we go into a closed session, I do have one item that came up just recently. We own the vacant lot at 322 8th Street South, and we have demolished the building. So what we normally do, and which we have done, is we notified both the adjacent landowners and asked if anybody was interested in obtaining the lot. One owner has expressed interest. So I need the city to start thinking about what we'd like to do with that lot at 322 8th Street South. It is not a buildable lot. Habitat for Humanity has been approached, it was about a year ago, and they were not interested in this lot. So if the council is interested in conveying it to the one interested owner, let me know. We can talk about it at the meeting on the 10th, but I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you. From my perspective, if the one entity is involved and we don't want to own it, whatever the statutory minimum is, I think that's appropriate to move forward with it. That would be my thoughts, so thank you.
It was a property donated to us by Wells Fargo, and we only had to pay the recording fee. So we only paid $46 plus the tipping fee to get this building.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, you'll come back with something for us on that?
We'll bring you back something. I'm going to research a little bit more what the cost we have into it and get back to you on the 10th. with
Thank
that,
you.
if that's
Thank you,
okay.
Britt. Okay.
It's my philosophy that any tax base is better than no tax base, so us holding it is no tax base. So if we can get it to a private party, that would be advantageous for all of us.
Well, before we go into closed session, can we move just to other items of concern? We have to talk about, again, the council meeting and the challenges that we have in December. I know that Councilor Johnson indicated he would prefer to have 2 council meetings and 2 committee of the whole meetings. But looking at the history of what we've had, we've usually only had 1 meeting a month because of the constraints of the holiday season, the time frame constraints. So staff has come up with an idea moving forward, maybe to have, of course, we have a committee meeting today. We have our council meeting on the 10th, including the truth and taxation at 6:30. And then to do another meeting on the 17th and do a combination committee of the whole or council meeting just on the 17th at night. So that was one of the thoughts moving forward. So we would actually have, we could do it in the morning or at night, either one. So that was one suggestion. Otherwise, we'd have to move it to another day or just have the 1 council meeting and the 1 committee of the whole meeting. So, or 2 committee of the whole meetings, I think. And then not have a council meeting until after January. So those are some of the things I think we have to sort that out. So whatever the council's, schedules can accommodate, that's fine with me. And like I said, Charlie's been around, or excuse me, Councilor Bearable has been around a long time, Councilor Barnzelli, and historically, there's only been 1 meeting, and we've been able to accommodate that, but we've had some significant issues, in the last year with our committee meetings and our council meetings, and that is a concern. We don't want these elongated meetings to even though that, if it takes all day, it takes all day, but in order to break that up into 2 separate entities, I think it's important to do, and I think staff has come up with this suggestion. Is that correct, Britt? Okay, thank you. Councilor Bearable?
Yeah, I have a concern that we've got a couple of big issues that are really coming up before the end of December, and one of them has to do with all the legal documents and stuff, getting ready for the school on the 706 thing. And the school is concerned, and this has come back from their school meetings, that the stuff is carrying over into January. If we can get that stuff done in December, they would like that because it helps their process with all their bonding and all their other stuff that they're going to be doing. And I think that's a huge concern. So I think we need a second council meeting personally.
Sure. So the suggestion would be, based upon that the 17th would be the second council meeting. Do one on the 10th and one on the 17th. And that council meeting on the 17th would be collab between committee of the whole, if there's any additional issues, and the council meeting. And the idea was it could be done in the morning or at night at 5:30 during the regular meeting. So that's kind of, we're trying to fit in those 2 council meetings.
Yeah, can't we just if it ends up accommodation, just put it all in one as a council meeting?
Yeah, that's the intent to do the cohesive.
That's what I would prefer personally, because we got to get these big issues taken care of.
So the question is, do we do it in the morning or do we do it in the evening?
I don't care, whichever for me.
Preferable in the morning? Preferable in the morning? Morning's fine? Morning? Okay, Council. Right, we are, well, we're going to combine
So the meeting would be
it.
at our normal committee the whole time, but it would
Want
be
to
a
do it in the
special council
morning
meeting.
or the afternoon? Councilor Paulson, Councilor Freely, and Councilor Bearable, myself are all okay with the morning. Are you okay with the morning? So we don't know what Councilor Johnson's schedule is, and Councilor Beyondich, you might have a conflict on the 17th in the morning. So what other options do we have? At night? Yeah, well, I think the preferable is in the morning, but if that's not workable for Councilor Beyondich and Councilor Johnson, can we do it at 5:30 at night on the 17th? Is that, even though that's probably not preferred, but in order to make sure we can accommodate all the councilors, would that be appropriate? Or is everybody else going to be, is somebody going to be gone, or is that a conflict? Councilor Freely. Oh, okay, that's right, yeah. Well, yeah, no doubt. Well, if we did it at 5:30, hopefully we'd be done before that. I mean, we would hope that. And in the meantime, Pam, our city clerk, is sending an email out to Counselor Johnson to see what, he's available, what time he's available. I'm sure maybe, I don't know, his schedule's kind of, with his morning schedule, but, so,
Talking a combination COW and
right, one meeting. Special council meeting. Yeah, we do that the 17th.
combined on the 17th.
Yeah, in lieu of committee of the
Still up
whole.
in the air whether it's going to be 9 or 5:30.
Right, correct. You'll make it work. Okay, so at night, you make it work, Counselor Bearable? No problem. Counselor Paulson? Okay with
If I
you?
have a Christmas program, I can be there.
Well, family first, always. So you could be there, and then Counselor Barnzelli, I certainly can too. Counselor Beyond, does that work for you, the night? Okay, very good. Well, then I would look for a motion to conduct the combined special council meeting, communal meeting on the 17th at 5:30.
Could it be at 5
We
p.m.?
could do it at 5.
A little earlier?
Yeah, we could do it at 5? Is 5, would that,
Be a little more settled on how quick I'm going to be going.
well, not 3 o'clock, because I have an employment meeting in Duluth that'll go until about 3:30, 4 o'clock. And I would have to get back in time,
5
which I
o'clock
would be able to do. But we do it, if we want to do it 4, I can make an accommodation for that too, so. 5 o'clock, okay?
I think so.
Okay.
It depends on how long we go on and on and on about things, but
Well, let's ensure domestic tranquility here. Let's make sure that we get done in the spirit of the holiday season. So, all right, thank you. He could make it at 9? Okay, well, we're going to do it at 5 o'clock apparently. So I'm looking for a motion to set the special council meeting for December 17th at 5 p.m.
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Counselor Beyondich and supported by
Support.
Counselor Baraboo. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Motion to set the council meeting, community meeting combination special meeting for December 17th, 5 o'clock at the City Council chambers. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. Counselor Paulson, excuse me.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I just have one other thing, if we may add maybe to the committee of the whole on, because the next meeting we have is our council meeting on the 10th. So then if we have anything further to bring forward, it would be on the 17th. Is that correct? So after we had a little meeting with the skating coaches, I don't know.
We can do that right now under other items of concern.
That's why I'm
Yep,
bringing this up.
yep.
But I don't know if it needs to go to the personnel or if it can just come to the committee of the whole.
I was going to suggest we do a personnel because we may have, the contracts should be ready for everybody to review one more time.
So we really probably wouldn't have enough time to get it back by January 1.
We could, if we got a personnel meeting next week and had it ready for approval on the 17th.
Okay.
We'll be moving quick, but I think we can do
So just knowing that
that.
there's going to be discussion coming forward regarding that program.
Well, let's just set a personnel committee meeting then. You and I think Counselor Varnzelli are on the personnel committee.
I don't remember.
Yeah, so we could set that, Counselor Freely on personnel? Okay, well, we could set the date right now, if you wanted to. Let's look at your schedules, and I'm flexible. So whatever your schedules work out for you, we could have it whenever, at whatever time is convenient.
What day normally what would you like, Britt?
I'm open Monday after 10,
The 9th or the 16th?
the 9th.
The 9th? Does that work for you?
10:30?
10:30?
Yeah.
Okay, make a motion.
I'll make that motion to
Motion
have
by
a
Counsel-
personnel committee meeting at 9:30 on the 9th.
Motion by Counselor Paulson to have a personnel committee meeting on December 9th at 10:30 here at the committee room. Okay, second by Counselor Freely. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Anything other have concern to come before the council before we move into closed session? Okay, let's take a break, and then let's make a motion to go into closed session right now, and then we'll just, after the break. Okay, moved by Councilor Bearable to move to closed session for negotiations and supported by Councilor Beyondich. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We'll now suspend the city council meeting